Welcome back to Morning Line on this Wednesday. Ron Shultis is with us from the Beacon Center. We're talking about the center's plan or traffic reduction proposal that's out now. Put it together in the aftermath, right, Ron, after the failure of the plan that was voted on for mass transit and such in the city. And now where do we go from here? And this is one option, I suppose. There's several options in here. Real quick, before we get to some of the next points, we have Cheryl that waited through the break. Hi, Cheryl. Go ahead.
Hi, how are you this morning, Nick?
Good. Good to hear from you.
Yeah. Well, this transit thing in Nashville. I don't live in Nashville, but I looked at Nashville on the TV and all that. It's a real pretty city. But when they started building too fast, and I've been telling my boyfriend they're going to outbuild themselves. And to me, it looks like they have, because they have a transit problem. There were no plans made in advance a long time ago about transit, you know, when the city did grow.
Yeah.
And,
right.
you know, this often happens to a lot of cities, and it's unfortunate. It really is. They should have planned this a long, long time ago. Nashville has outbuilt themselves. They really have. No,
you're right. I mean, and that's politicians, and as it is, very rarely are you lucky to have enough of a forward-thinking politician who is able to cultivate the public support to address something proactively that may cost a little money in the outset, but if you do it, we react after that. Hey, it's not just Nashville. I live in Mount Juliet, okay? I'm sorry. They messed up. I mean, the traffic there is brutal. It's built and it's grown and it's a great place. There's so much there. The infrastructure and the roads are not enough. It ain't cutting it. It's not even close, and it's going to get worse. And it's like they don't address it till it's too late.
Government is generally not as adaptive and quick as the private sector.
Well, no politician wants to have to ask for money ahead of time before it's truly needed, so they just put it off so they can say, well, I didn't raise taxes or I didn't spend money. And then you put it pass the buck, and then finally it blows up in your face and you're paying a fortune to get out of the mess that could have been avoided if people would just bite the bullet early on. But that's just human nature, unfortunately. That's just the way it is. You know, it's unfortunate. It's time and time and time again. And I don't blame the lawmakers. I blame the constituents that aren't forward-thinking enough and just are always thinking about their pocketbook. And you're going to say, well, pocketbook's important. But, man, you got to spend sometimes. It's not just going to happen organically without putting some money into it to address an issue as it grows. Whether you pay it through taxes from the citizens that live there, or make the businesses, or cut away the public welfare, it's going to cost money. Anyone who doesn't think is just living in a dream world, and you know that.
Things do cost money, for sure.
Yes, absolutely. Come on, man. So you got to bite the bullet sometimes, or you're going to live in a bad situation. And sooner or later, Nashville's going to start taking steps back, because people are going to say, this reminds me of LA and New York. I don't want to live here.
Things need to be done. What we've tried to show is that it doesn't have to take a lot of money, and some of our ideas cost no money. Yeah. So those are the types of things we should start with before we start talking about billions and billions of dollars, though expensive.
And I think the taxpayer agrees with you on that. That's why we're sitting here now. So one of them here that does not cost money is eliminate government bans on private transportation companies' ability to compete and innovate, particularly shuttle companies. Now, that's right. Talk about that. I mean, we already have taxis, and there are shuttles down there, like the Beer Tavern, Pedal Taverns, and all that. I don't know if that counts. What are you referring to here, and what's banning them?
Think about like a private bus company. I used to live in Chicago, and there was a bus company called the Free Enterprise Bus System, and that was a private company that created more what they thought were better routes to weave through the city versus the CTA. Here in Nashville, there is a regulation that says if you want to start a private shuttle company, you have to get a license by them, and it has to be on a pre-approved route. Now that makes no sense, particularly in this day and age. There are companies like, I'll just use Via as an example. It's kind of a merger between public transit and ride sharing like Uber and Lyft, where they say we're going to have a shuttle that you can press on your app that creates an on-demand route that only has a route where there's actually demand for it in real time. And it doesn't necessarily pick you up right at your doorstep like an Uber or Lyft does, but maybe it says, hey, come down to the corner block and we'll pick you up and then go to wherever our next customer is.
Yeah.
So, but that company wouldn't be able to operate here in Nashville because it's not a dedicated route. It changes on demand. And what we want to do is look at ways that government is preventing private companies and entrepreneurs from providing services that can help create more innovative and dynamic solutions.
Okay, and that sounds good. Now, at the same time, I understand, and I'm sure you're not saying just free for all. It has to be some degree regulated. Otherwise, you could potentially have a bunch just popping up with unregulated routes, and ultimately that just adds to the congestion if they all show up like this. You know what I'm saying? I mean, if you just do that and just get rid of these regulations, say, oh, any private transportation company, set up shop, do your thing, and yeah, I think they'll come, but that could make the traffic worse.
But I mean, we want to obviously make sure that, you know, their drivers are trained, so that way they're going to be driving people. You want to make sure that there's obviously a public health and safety component. But what I would say is that, you know, there are a lot of, you know, Nashville buses that aren't being ridden a lot, that are clogging up traffic because there's not a demand for that route. But because politicians want to route there or bureaucrats want to route there, they're clogging up traffic for not a lot of demand. You could have that maybe in the short run, but if there's not the demand for that company, they're going to go out of business rather than having taxpayers continue to subsidize that permanent bus route.
Okay, and you're also saying it's not just possibly those types of shuttles on the roads, but it also would be something that could address these bird scooters, right? I mean, is that something, well, we've seen they've been challenged and banned to some degree for blocking sidewalks or whatever. So that would allow those to function more?
That's one of the things that we would look at. Bird scooters were a great example of what's called last mile and first mile.
Exactly.
That scenario where, you know, you got a mile to walk. It's a little too far to walk, particularly right now in this heat, right? This oppressive humidity. But you don't necessarily need to call a taxi or an Uber for a mile, but you don't want to walk it. Bird scooters were a great solution to that, but the problem is that we basically regulated them out of business. Obviously, there is a point where you want to make sure that they're not causing safety issues and all that, but to say that, you know, they have to pay bonds and registration fees per scooter, that's silly. And what we want to do is make sure that private businesses can come up with ideas that, because now what are those people doing that are here on a Saturday at 2 o'clock and they don't want to walk up the hill to their hotel on 4th? They're calling an Uber, and that's an extra car on the road.
That's right. You know, that first and last mile transportation option, I totally understand that. I was telling him at one point about how if I could, I would take Music City Star, and at one point I was looking into it when the gas prices got real expensive. I could have hopped on the stop there in Mount Juliet and brought it in, but it drops me off. It would drop me off at Riverfront Park, which is about, I don't know, 3/4 of a mile from the station here. So I had already been thinking about how I'm going to do this. It ended up not happening because the hours didn't work with me. I was going to buy one of those small little electric scooters. And I was going to have that with me. I was just carrying. Some of those you can just carry. I would carry it on the train with me. I'd get off at Riverfront and take the scooter up to the station. That was my plan. And so I see what you're saying about bird scooters. That's what I would have needed for the final mile or 3/4 of a mile to get to work.
And where I used to live a while ago, Chicago had Divvy bikes, where they had bike stations all across the city that you could pay for a membership, that you would ride it from one location to the next and you could just deposit it there. It was perfect for that, you know, hey, that little bit you get off the train or from your hotel to Broadway or whatever you want to do.
It's a great idea. And we've got some of those bikes now here, those red bikes. I don't know, is that what they're called? But the ones, they've got them parked here. They do it in DC also. What is it called again? B-Cycle. Yeah, you see that? And they're cool looking bikes. Let's go to Grady. Hi, Grady.
Good morning, Nick and Ron. You know, Bill Waters, several years ago, timed their lights, you know, and that was innovative thinking back then. But, you know, what we've got now is people coming up with the wildest ideas that do nothing and giving this property away to these people coming in here. It's ridiculous. And thank God Ron's there, and, you know, he's got some ideas that'll help us and save us money. That ridiculous $9 billion, and it's going to take 15 years to complete. That had to be the worst thinking we ever had. They're going to make it hard to have area with that kind of thinking. I'll hang up and listen to y'all's comment.
All right, thank you. Yeah, he's talking about former Councilman Leo Waters years ago, I guess. Did some time, yeah, and you've heard about that where lights are timed. What we were talking about earlier is lights that can be instantly changed if they have to go with the traffic flow, which is a step beyond that.
Absolutely. We have done timing optimizations. The last one was in 2016. It makes a big difference, but with the growth that Nashville is experiencing, we need something even above and beyond that, and it would make a big difference.
you're saying create and encourage an alternative work solution program for Metro Nashville employees. Would these be solutions possibly where you encourage folks, because of high-speed internet and everything else, to maybe work at home as opposed to having to commute into work?
Absolutely.
Or to an office downtown or something?
You've got it exactly correct, Nick. Right now, with our economy and technology advancing, we're becoming more service-oriented, more access to on-demand, high-speed internet. There's a lot of work that can be done remotely now, or at least doesn't have to be done from the traditional 9 to 5. You know, that's one of the main perks that companies offer nowadays in the private sector is work from home. There was a company in the building next to ours that just went completely remote. They're going to have 250 employees now work from home because the work can be done remotely.
Yeah. You can have meetings remotely with Skype or teleconferencing or whatever.
Right, and let's say you do want to bring people in for a meeting in person. There are on-demand meeting spaces that you can rent now. That's a whole type of business operation where they just have spaces for on-demand meetings for people to come together once. So this is an opportunity where obviously your judge, your police officer, they can't work remotely, but if you're having somebody doing data entry or a lot of typing, why can't some of that work be done from home? Employees love it. I know one of the greatest perks at my job is that we get to work remote a couple of days a month. I mean, particularly as millennials, we love that flexibility, right? Metro Nashville government is one of the largest employers in our city, over 9,000 employees. If you had even 10% of them work remotely, you're talking almost 1,000 cars taken off the road daily. Yeah. Santa Barbara County, California did this. They had a whole program called FlexWork where the government and they worked with private businesses to make that part of their strategy. It sounds simple, but hey, if you can work remote, work remote. And they worked with companies to kind of make this an initiative of theirs, and they took 90,000 trips off the road every single year. Wow.
Think about that. That really does make a lot of sense. And beyond just the traffic, think if you're the employer who's renting this expensive office space downtown, and all of a sudden you cut your workforce in half, meaning that half of them can work. You could downsize to a much smaller office and save a bundle of cash
you
there
can
as
save,
well.
Right. The business saves money. Not only your employee saves money, they don't have the gas and the wear and tear on their vehicle. Metro Nashville could save money. Maybe they could downsize some of their office spaces, particularly in our budget shortfall. If they have the ability to sublease some of Metro Nashville's buildings, it can save money. It improves quality of life, takes away CO2 emissions as well. It's a very simple solution, but can make a meaningful difference.
The bottom line on that is I'm sure it is already happening in a smaller scale, but that's the future. That's going to happen.
Absolutely.
It will. Listen, we'll take a break. We'll be back with more of your phone calls and more from our guest in our final segment right after this.